Hello and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on 5 exhibitor challenges and how to overcome them. An extra warm welcome to our guest speaker, Steve Loughton, Managing Director of Gestic Limited. Steve will touch a little more on his role at Gestic shortly. Just to let you know, this webinar is brought to you by FaceTime. Some of you will already be familiar with the FaceTime initiative, but for those who aren't, it's an industry-funded initiative designed to educate, inform and assist exhibitors in enhancing their exhibiting performance. We do have a suite of resources, most of which are free. For any questions on these, please feel free to drop me an email after the webinar on carmen@aeo.org.uk. We will be dedicating a short time to questions at the end of this session, so if you do have anything you want answered during the presentation, please drop them in the questions box and Steve will do his best to answer a few, time permitting. This webinar is being recorded and we will be sending out the slides, so don't worry if you don't have time to scribble everything down. So just for a quick overview on the FaceTime resources, there's the hugely popular Exhibitor Masterclass, which is a one-day event with a range of speakers covering everything from stand design to social media. You can find out more about our upcoming event at NEC Birmingham on the 21st of July at facetime.org.uk/masterclass. Our exhibitor shorts have been widely used among the exhibitor community. They're a great way to get to grips with the exhibiting cycle in an easy-to-digest format. Additionally, there are exhibitor guides for your reference, as well as research. We also have exhibitor performance-enhancing webinars, which you're currently sat on, which generally run every 6 to 8 weeks. Keep an eye out for news on the next, and of course, if you feel like there's anything you'd like to learn more about, do drop us a line. If there's a demand for that topic, we'll certainly cover it. That's a wrap from me, and over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Carmen, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Steve Loughton, as Carmen mentioned, and I work with a company called Gestic Limited. We are in the commercial catering equipment business, and we have about 100 employees in our business. We are a distributor of equipment in the UK, so we import equipment from North America as well as mainland Europe and distribute it around the country in the UK. I have been involved in exhibitions, either organising them, visiting them, or working on exhibition stands over more years than I care to remember. But I've worked in North America, in mainland Europe, in the UK, in the Middle East, and also South Africa. So I have a little bit of experience of what it takes to organise and run an effective show, and I think that's what we're here to try and work out this afternoon. The majority of my experience is in B2B, slightly less in B2C, but nevertheless, I don't think that anything I'm about to say will be irrelevant in terms of that process. So, the AEO has asked me to talk about some tips and challenges we all face. So, whether you're new to exhibiting or whether you're experienced, we'll talk about exhibiting generally in the next half hour or thereabouts. And the plan is that you would get some tips to take away and use to make your show participation better planned, less stressful, more productive, and with a greater chance of achieving the result you want. Now, some of you may have heard a lot of what I'm going to say before, and some of you won't, but I certainly hope that you'll get sufficient to take away to make life interesting for you. Okay, so on to the first slide here now, just while this scrolls up. Not quite moving on to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So the first slide here is what looks like a pretty complicated flowchart. In fact, it's pretty simple. It's split into 4 sections. And the idea is to help you look at selecting the right show. When you've got the right show, how do we plan it? When we planned it, how do we actually deliver it on the day or on the 2 or 3 days that the show comprises or whatever it happens to be. And then what should we do about follow-up at the end? So although the flowchart looks complex, it's actually quite straightforward. And it's quite important that as we go through this process, you walk through the chart and remember that every step that we've got here is aligned with the one previously. Now, as Carmen said, you'll have these slides at the end of the presentation, so there's no need to try and remember them or be scribbling things down, as she said. So moving on, the first thing really is selection and research. And although this sounds like a basic question, is this the right show to be going to? There are all kinds of shows around. There's international shows, national shows, regional shows, vertical or horizontal shows. And if we just take that as a description, for example, as I said before, I'm in the commercial catering equipment business. And for us, an example of a vertical show would be a show mostly regional that would focus on commercial catering equipment, and that alone. A horizontal show would be one that would focus on side topics as well. So, for example, if you were in the hotel trade, you'd be interested in furniture, bedding, perhaps staff uniforms, food, and those kinds of things. So if I say vertical and horizontal, that's what I mean, one that's very focused or one that's a little bit wider. And of course it goes without saying that you should choose your show carefully because mistakes are expensive. Now we've chosen the show, will it deliver our target audience? And following on from the previous point, we have to choose carefully because you need to know what sort of show are you targeting, or what sort of visitor are you targeting more accurately? Are you targeting buyers? Are you targeting operations people, specifiers, influencers, corporates, or individuals? And we'll look a little bit later on at how you should focus on which of those targets you're actually focusing on. Do you have the right teams in place? Are you aligned internally? And by that what I mean is everybody that needs to be involved fully engaged and understand what's going on? So someone needs to be doing the right amount of planning. Someone has to fill in the exhibitor manual. Someone has to make sure that the equipment or the goods or whatever it is you're displaying get in and out of the hall and the exhibition centre properly and undamaged and on time. Someone needs to make sure that the implementation of the whole thing is right. If we've got PR, are they firing on all cylinders? Do they understand the landscape that you're about to go into? Do they understand exhibitions, or are they a PR company that does media only? Will they be inviting trade media to your stand for interviews? If not, they should be. Don't leave this to chance. Make sure somebody knows what to be saying to those people when they come along. Have digital press packs and literature ready. It's a great way when they can be invited to the stand, the trade media, to get yourself further coverage in magazines and media generally after the show. And finally, there are the organisers passionate. Are they just running this show because it's a show that they run? Or is it a topic or a subject that they care about? Are they running shows across many, many different types of disciplines? Or are they focusing on one part of business? What can they do to help you? Have they got marketing ideas? Have they got tips about the show if you haven't been there before? Do they know any other contacts in the show that you might be able to benefit or that might be able to benefit you? Are there any kind of presentation stages or educational seminars going along alongside the show that you could be involved in or that you could help to sponsor or whatever? Finally, are the organisers wired into the trade media for your industry, or indeed are they running it themselves? And if they are or if they aren't, what deals can be done around the show? We all know that a show is a great amount of activity for an industry, and there's always things that can be done to enhance presentation and to enhance your visibility at the show. Many of you will have seen what we're looking at on the next slide now. It's a pretty typical enough style of floor plan that the organisers will send out ahead of the show, and they'll say to you, well, select a stand, where do you want to be? And if you're a new person to exhibiting a show, that can be quite daunting because there are some big spaces there are some small spaces there, and that's not unusual at all. The key, of course, is to decide as quickly as possible where you want to be and where you want to have your stand. Is there an area that makes a natural fit for your company or your products? This show happens to be a floor stand for a software exhibition, and what you can see there quite clearly in the coloured sections is that there are some themed areas. There's logistics and education and so on the right-hand side. Could you sponsor one of those areas for hopefully a small sum of money, but get your name across there, sponsoring and being associated with a part of the industry that makes sense for you? Do you want your stand to be close to entrances or exits? Would you like to be close to your competitors, or do you prefer to be away from them? How does the traffic flow how's the footfall in the show? Can the organising people, the exhibitor, the organising company help you to understand how that works? Are there times when certain areas might be quiet? So, for example, at lunch times, does everybody gravitate to one end of the hall where the restaurant is? And if that's so, is that a place where you want to be or not? Pose those questions to the organisers, see what they say, and maybe while you're making your mind up, perhaps you can reserve a couple of stands, as long as it's without any obligation, but perhaps you can reserve a couple of stands while you work together to try and work out which is the best one to have. So now we've got that far, we've selected which show we're going to, we've selected which stand we're going to be on, we've worked with the organisers, we've made some basic announcements, some initial announcements. Now we get on to the planning section of the actual show itself, or the actual stand itself within the show, which is that second section in the middle. So the first thing obviously is to make sure, although it's the third bullet there on that section, make sure that we've got the right budget. Have we set a realistic budget? What is your expectation of return on investment? And what do you need for the right presentation of your company, your products, etc.? If you're acting as a distributor, as my company does, will your suppliers make a contribution towards your stand? It could be a cash contribution. They might loan or give you some products. They might give you marketing help, or they might give you assistance on the stand, or whatever. Something we'll talk about a little bit later on is social media, retweeting hashtags and that kind of thing. If you're working with suppliers, particularly if they're international, and you can get them to work with you to promote your hashtag or your company name, then of course you can get, again, a reach that's beyond your immediate territory. But whatever you do, the three words there which I think are most important is plan, plan, plan. If you don't plan, something's going to go wrong. So now we've decided that we have got a budget, we're in the exhibition hall. What sort of stand do we want? Do we want a shell stand, or what they call a shell scheme, or do we want space only? And that depends on several factors, the look and feel that you're trying to create, the cost of that, and your budget. Have you got a stand designer, or can your PR company help? We'll look a little bit more in a couple of slides about stands and how they can look and what you can create and achieve with them. But what look and feel are you going for? Obviously that's a very subjective point, but how do you represent yourselves normally? Is this a regional, a national, or an international show? That might mean, if it's international, for example, and you knew that there were lots of trade buyers coming from Italy or France, should you have an Italian or French speaker on the stand to support them? Do you need a reception desk? Do you need a meeting room? Do you need refreshments on the stand? Do you expect to have Wi-Fi on the stand? Will you have graphics, video machine? Will people be wearing a uniform or some common item of clothing that at least will make them easy to identify for visitors? Everybody should at least have a company name badge so visitors know to whom they're speaking. You need to make sure that you've got adequate space on the stand for coats and bags, especially in winter. And if you're not going to create space for coats and bags, then make sure that you use the hall cloakrooms and you know where they are, because that avoids clutter. Don't forget that every square metre of your stand costs money, so don't waste it with dead storage. Have you got room, though, for literature? Have you got room for samples? All those kinds of things. Those are all the questions that help you decide the amount of floor space you need and whether you're going to go for a shelf scheme or space, what's called space, and then design and build a stand around it. But when you're running the stand, now you're there, are you just going to run it yourselves? Is it just you as an entrepreneur or an individual? Maybe your partner? Maybe family? Or are you going to use office staff? Can you bring staff in out of the field if you have field staff? Can they come in and run it or help you run it? Are you going to employ staff just for the show? And if you do, are they what we call meeters and greeters, just to smooth people's transition from the exhibition floor onto your stand? Or should they know something about your product and about what they do, what you do? If they should know about what you do, make sure you've chosen the right people. Make sure they're obviously presentable and articulate and that they understand what you do. Finally, in terms of running the stand, something I've always done is made sure that I've had a stand manager. And that stand manager, a member of your staff normally, is someone that knows exactly what's going on. He or she will know exactly how to fix anything that goes wrong or know where to go to get it fixed. And they will be the master of ceremonies that make sure everything's run smoothly from the moment the chime rings to open the show to the chime ringing again to close the show. Can you get in and out of the show? Okay, is that all planned? Your accommodation, if it's an overnight show or 2 or 3 day show, do you know where you're going to be staying? Have you planned for those costs and included them in your budget? Where are you staying? Are you staying close to the exhibition hall, or are you going to stay somewhere a little bit further away? Whichever you do, make sure that you figure in traffic and logistics. Quite often I talk to people who will exhibit at a show in a city where they don't know their whereabouts or they don't know their way round. They don't know what public transport's like. They don't know what the road system is like. They can easily spend any amount of time more than they expected to get to the show and be late or at worst flustered when they get there. So when you work that out, are you going to be entertaining in the evenings? If you are you just entertaining your own staff or providing subsistence for them, or are you entertaining customers? Now that might be part of someone's individual objectives, and we'll cover that one a little bit later on as well. I've got 2 or 3 slides here of examples of exhibition stand. This first one is a space-only stand. And the first thing that we can say about it is, number one, it's a modestly sized stand. It's flat to the floor, so there's no step up from the exhibition floor up onto the stand. This is a straightforward shelf scheme, and this would be pretty well what the organisers supply for you. A name board, a backboard, or two side boards, sometimes 3. You'll only have sometimes 1 entry onto the stand. But BHS here have made it look quite attractive. They put some graphics on the back. They've got a table and chairs, obviously, and a little box at the front there, which has probably got shelves on the other side for storing things like a laptop or a handbag and lead forms and that kind of thing. So the simplest form of stand and the most inexpensive way to get started. The second one we can look at here now is clearly a company that's determined to make a little bit more of an impact in the show that they attend. And this is a space-only stand. So basically what they've done is they bought the floor space from the manufacturers, and then they designed and built what they needed to go onto that space to attract people. The one thing I noticed straight away about this is that It's very open. It's very inviting. There are very few barriers to entry. I assume that on the front of this, the view that we're looking at is one of the main gangways of the show. And that's another thing when planning which stand you're going to take and its location, is make sure that you don't position the front of your stand, which is looking right onto the back of someone else's. That can often be a big annoyance when you finally get to the show. The third picture here is a company I'm sure most of us know, and if we don't know the company, we will have seen their diggers around, and we know that orange is their colour. And this is a fantastically striking stand. I mean, it hits you right between the eyes. You'll notice straight away that it's on a plinth, so you can step up onto it straight away, which gives that little bit of a feeling of being people need to step up onto your stand and they're into your space. But the thing that you notice as well is that it's, again, very, very open. It encourages people to walk on. It's got lots of space for people to move around, and it feels very, very open and welcoming. I think that's just a lovely stand. Moving on a little bit more now, we're talking about objective setting and planning. So I believe strongly in objective setting. Everybody that's involved in the show needs to be able to verbalise and achieve their own objectives. And by that I mean, what do they want? What are they looking for from the show? Are they looking for orders? Are they looking for new distributors? Are they launching a product or a service? And if you've got a sales team, for example, the company I work with, we have about 12 or 13 salespeople on the road, and 4 or 5 of them at any one time will have similar objectives because they work individual field territories. Not necessarily the same, but similar. And then national account guys will have a different objective. So there's not anything wrong with having several different objectives. The key thing, though, is how will they achieve those objectives? And one of the ways to achieve those objectives, if they are looking for people to come specifically to the stand, is to invite customers. Why should they come if you don't invite them? We can't assume that our target will know everything about this show and what's going on. So we need to maybe invite them to the stand. We could invite them to a launch. We could invite them to dinner or lunch or maybe even breakfast. But there needs to be an outcome with that invitation. In my opinion, it's not much good saying to people, yes, why don't you come along to the stand and see us? I think what you need to say is, why don't you come along to the stand and see us? Because what we're going to do is show you a new solution for that problem that you've got, or our new widget, or our new XYZ, or whatever it happens to be. Do you need to print a little simple special invitation to people that would tell them why they're coming to the stand and why you want them to come to the stand? That invitation could also have their entry ticket attached to it. It could have the barcode invitation. It could have anything attached to it just to make it stand out that little bit more. But in terms of these objectives, you need to, as the person that's involved, either maybe the owner of the company or the senior person in the company, or maybe just the person in the marketing department. I say just, I don't mean just, but the person in the marketing department that's responsible for making the show a success. You need to encourage people with their objectives. You need to participate in their objectives and help them to progress the objectives from A to Z as we go through this journey. And sometimes that means setting aside some budget to help them, joining them in their own planning process and showing that interest and assistance that they need, and then working out a way to help them celebrate the success that they surely will have at the end of the show. But I think that the wider company objectives should be dovetailed by the individual's objectives, because there's little point if all of the guys on the ground are heading in one direction with their objectives and the company's heading in a completely 180-degree different direction. So there can be lots and lots of different objectives, but can you tie them into something that's a little bit of a wider company objective? And that's where I've mentioned before, they could be individual product launches, they could be invitations supported by a central event, an educational seminar, a river cruise, it could be anything. And then measuring that ROI, this ROI is the return on investment, and simply speaking, if we were to divide the total cost of the show, and people do this in different ways, sometimes they only take the stand cost, sometimes they take in the lodging and the entertainment and the subsistence as well. You obviously can do it any way you want. But if you divide the total cost of the show by the number of leads or the number or value of sales that you make, so to explain that, if you spend £10,000 on the show in total and picked up 100 leads, each lead would cost you £100. Now, in your business and in your industry and in your mind, is that a lot of money to spend for a lead? That's up to you to decide. But the question there then becomes, how would that compare with any other cost or any other form of cost of lead generation and conversion? Because if you could get the same number of leads somewhere else for £25, why would you spend £100? Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, I'm just saying that it's a question that you should ask yourself. And that's up to you. We've talked about amplifying here, or I'm now going to talk a little bit about amplifying your attendance at the show. And the goal here is to try and make more of the show than might naturally be yours. And I'll explain what I mean by that. It's about presence. So we talked quite a bit about budget so far. You need to make sure that you set a realistic budget for everything that needs to be achieved. Now, advertising. For example, you will surely get a free exhibitor's entry in the exhibition catalogue. But if there's relevant trade media that are doing show previews and follow-ups, then normally if you book these, or you book a little series of something in the preview, something in the show issue, and then something in the follow-up, they don't need to be expensive. But then you can normally lean on that publication to make sure that you get an action photo of the stand published in the review. If you are running a little competition on the stand, or you're celebrating success on the stand, you can normally persuade them to come along and take a photo and publish it for you. The other advantage of a magazine doing that, of course, is that the photo that they take will almost inevitably be of a high quality, and of course it'll be free, all of which helps. And you need to make sure that you agree with them and confirm with them that copies of that photo can then be used on social media or your website. You can tweet it, you can put it on Instagram, and they can also help to publicise the hashtag that you're going to create for your show, which we'll talk about in just a second. So all of that, the trade media are your friends, not your enemy, and they don't need to be an expensive way to advertise your presence. Something that's come along very strongly in the last few years, of course, as business and times have changed, is this idea of a hashtag. Can you create a catchy hashtag to advertise yourselves or a new product or a new ad campaign? If you can, use it on as much social media as possible ahead of the show. Use it as a graphic on your stand. Can you sponsor visitor entry badges with it? Should you put it on your lapel badges? Can you put it on coffee cups? All of that kind of thing, because that hashtag then will extend way beyond your stand and the duration of that show. We'll come on to something there in a second when I show the next slide. Can you run a competition on the stand? That might encourage more people to visit you than wouldn't normally come. And the competition could be anything. It could be tied in with a supplier. If you've got a supplier with a factory, as we have, for example, quite close to Venice, it's quite nice to say, if you would like a nice trip to Venice, come and visit our factory at the same time. And of course, for other more business-orientated people, you might put that the other way round and say, visit our factory, and then maybe have a side trip to Venice. Or it could be a prize that's relevant to your industry or to what they do. And if you have it culminating, the draw or the final entry culminating on the stand during the show, then again that magazine, if you've linked in with them, can help you publicise it and again amplify your presence there. And link with the organisers. We talked about them at the beginning, but don't forget them, because once you've got to the show, they're there to make sure that it runs smoothly. But also ahead of the show, and sometimes during, they're there to help you make contacts between people that need each other. Someone might need a little bit of financial help to sponsor a competition, their own competition, or they might need a loan of a piece of equipment, and for that they may put their sign on your stand, or vice versa. Those kinds of things are great because it can give you a presence in another area of the hall that you wouldn't perhaps normally have. If we look at this next slide now, here, the inverted triangle, if we look at the sharp part of the triangle at the bottom, this is representing the audience that you have at the exhibition. These are the people that get out of bed in the morning and either want to come to the show and to your stand, or are able to come to the show and your stand. If you're exhibiting in a show overseas, then you shouldn't always expect, obviously, that all of your potential market can come and visit. So the arrow on the left shows the size of audience, and the size of audience is totally the aggregate of the people that come to the stand and the non-attendees, but the ones that you can advise of your presence. So you've got to try and make sure that your brand, your product message is amplified outside of that finite exhibition audience, and building a consistent campaign with social, PR, digital. You want to make sure that that wider audience allow that wider audience to experience the brand as if they were there. So you're bringing the exhibition to them. You've got to immerse them in the brand and the activity. And you can do that without significant financial outlay, particularly with social media. I know in our business we involve quite a few different members of the team in that. We've got 2 or 3 young people in our business that are particularly well versed with using social media and have helped us invent snappy hashtags and helped us to show us and educate people like myself about how to get the best out of those kinds of things. So now we've done all of our planning. We're in the penultimate section now. We've done all of our planning. We've done a lot of the hard work, but now we're there. It's day one. We're now going to run the stand. This is the hard part, but it should also be the exciting part, because this is the interface between you and your customers. So we've already talked about achievable objectives for the stakeholders. They should all know why they're there. They should all know why they have come to the show and what they're expecting. We talked about a stand manager running the stand. We've talked about our accommodation and our entertaining. So we've got all of that taped and covered and finished. I like to involve the wider company in the stand as well. Where it's possible, when it's not an overseas show, we try and organise that as many staff as possible would come up to the show. They might work the stand if they have a particular expertise that we can use at the show. They may just be people that aren't specifically involved in marketing or the brand, but love to visit the show. We bring up warehouse people, our back office finance people. We ask them to walk around. Sometimes we set them objectives and say, go and visit 2 or 3 stands, which we would name, and see if they can pick up not only literature, but get a feel for how they represent themselves. And it also gives them a chance to see how we represent ourselves outside of our own office. And the last bullet there, I think, is very important, the idea of celebration. Spend some time to reward anyone that's gone the extra mile. And going that extra mile might be the person that's picked up the most leads. They might have got the biggest order. They might have been the person that's helped everybody else more on the stand than anyone else. You might have 2 winners or 3 winners. And that could be as simple as a bottle of champagne, or it could be a meal out for 2 people. quite often we tend to forget partners, the husband or wife or the boyfriend or girlfriend that's been left at home while we're away at this glamorous event, and they're at home doing all of the chores and providing the backup. A meal for two is a great way to reward them as well and say thanks very much for giving me access to your partner to work with us during the day and sometimes in the evening. If you work for a particularly big company and you have company benefit points, for example, that might add up to enhanced payments or recognition somehow, these points could go towards that as well. And naturally, what it also does is it provides some fun for people and something to look forward to and a certain expectation. So we've said that there. I think I skipped a slide there. Move on now to the follow-up. So now we are actually there now. We're in the final section. Part of this is during the show and part is after. This is the final section now in part one. We've got another little section after this. But what do we do with all these fantastic leads now when the circus has finally left town? And we've got other things that we need to be getting on with. Well, the first thing we need to do is qualify as many leads as we can, but do them on the stand. If you work in a particularly busy environment, often B2C particularly, business to consumers particularly, you need to be as brutal as necessary to move time wasters on around the stand. You haven't got time to sit and pass the time of day with people that aren't going to help you achieve your objectives. Taking a lead, use a simple lead form, electronic if it suits, to capture information. If they have a business card, staple it right onto the form. Not only will that be quick, but it means that you capture all the contact details correctly and save time writing. Capture the correct info. Are they purchasing, specifying, buying for themselves or on behalf of a company? Do they have purchasing authority? How would they prefer to be contacted? Don't send a letter if they requested the speed of an email. Ask what their expectation of speed to quote or order completion might be. Have sufficient resources in place to do the follow-up. And don't wait for the end of the show to start. So many times I talk to people, and on the final day of the show, when they're tired, they've got all of the getting back to the normal office routine to be getting on with, they then have to look at a whole load of leads. So don't wait for the end of the show to start. Do a sweep every evening or the next morning if you've got a stand receptionist. They can help you with that. They could start emailing and contacting people throughout the day. Typically, speed is of the essence. If you're exhibiting widgets, for example, and so are several other companies, you'll all be getting the same leads. People won't come to the show and see several widget manufacturers and then just come to you, or you're very lucky if they do. I've done a bit of research here, and according to an organisation called Salesforce Training, between 80 and 85% of trade show leads are never followed up, and 15% take up to 50 days to follow up. So it's very easy to do better than that. Whatever method you do use, keep at it. Retain the look and feel of the stand and the hashtag you created to maintain that top-of-mind recall of the company. Don't give up first time. In fact, don't give up till the third or fourth time. I'm going to move on now to some challenges and solutions. We've looked at planning, we've looked at executing, and we all know that the best way is to plan ahead. But what happens if it doesn't quite go as planned? Well, that doesn't mean that all is necessarily lost. Some of what we're going to review in this second, much shorter section may be a rework of what we've already covered, but it's valuable nevertheless. And what I've done here, if I come back to my flow chart, I've picked out there, as you can see, I picked out from the select vertical column the budget assignment. From the plan section, I picked out the PR agency workshop and input, and defining your marketing initiatives. I picked out running the stand, and I picked out leads, because these are the things I think that we need to look at as we review where we go forward. So, a few little challenges and comments then. Sometimes I say to people, well, how was your show? How was your stand? And they say, well, it wasn't as good as we thought, you see, because the competition has just got bigger budgets than we've got. And salesmen will quite often say that. Well, the thing, in my opinion, focus on your own USPs. Look after what you do best. Follow your strategy without worrying too much about other people. We talked a bit about budgets and expenditures. Spend smart. Don't waste money on anything that doesn't add value during that crucial period of the show. Don't forget what I talked about with floor space and storage. Stay in the appropriate value accommodation as reasonably close to the show as possible. Don't spend money on time and travelling. Try to invest rather than spend. So if you have graphics made, can they be used back in your own showroom or in a dealer's showroom? Can you keep and reuse any of the stand at a later stage? If not, don't pay to store it unless you're really going to use it, because it tends to be a false economy. Think back to that lovely orange JCB stand. There's every possibility that they'll be taking the majority of those graphics and using them again and again. Look for low cost, high impact. And we've covered some of this, but think again of social media. Think of co-op ventures with other exhibitors or cost sharing. For example, do you need refrigeration on your stand? And you might be able to store someone else's products overnight, and they may help you in a complementary fashion somewhere down the line. Of course, the last thing is reclassify the budget. Could you reclassify some of those costs, if it's a big company you work for, into other budgets? For example, it could be some sales and marketing, or training, or entertaining, or new product development. And of course, the ultimate final one, if all else fails, can you just make the budget bigger? That's always a nice one to be considering. We talked a bit about achieving the target audience, and if you want to make sure that they're coming, make sure that you are doing exactly what they need to get them there to achieve your objectives. Make sure that there are items of specific interest that they need to be heading for. Is there a product launch that you can arrange to happen at the show for maximum impact? We've looked at objectives. Make sure that those objectives are all there, they're achievable, feasible, doable, and that you help the individual people set aside some budget to make them work. We talked about seminars or educational events or something like that that will, again, widen your impact at the show. Sorting the serious inquiries when we're at the show, again, people quite often say, well, we've just been totally overwhelmed. And sometimes people will go to great lengths to write down the names and addresses of people that we already know. If you already know them, don't write their details down unless they want something new, but you may record their attendance for some reason. Have you got visitors that just grab all your free samples? And I guess, to me, that's slightly hard luck. If you put out free sweets or samples, don't expect them not to be taken. Although you may judiciously remove the sweetie jar if it's a very busy time. Do people have a business card? That helps sort out serious customers. Quite often at B2B shows, I will talk to people and say, have you got a card? And they say, no, not on me. Well, there's a good chance then they don't have a card, because you wouldn't go to a show without a card. I always try and encourage people to have 3 killer entry questions that you can use for people that walk on the stand. And what it shouldn't be is, the first question should not be, can I help you? Because you encourage people to say, no thanks. Here's 3 quick examples that you might use or build on. I see you're looking at our XYZ. Is that of particular interest? Or do you have an XYZ already and looking for an upgrade? Or one of my favourite ones, I'm so glad you're looking at our XYZ, it's my personal favourite. Or it's the model we sell most of. Or it's our biggest seller. Or it's the best value for money that we have. What that helps to do is engage people in conversation rather than giving them the opportunity to give you the closed answer, which is, no, you can't help, thanks very much. And then for many people, I know particularly in B2C, this is a difficult one. You've got to learn the art of the elegant brush off, because none of us set out to be impolite. So it isn't always easy to do politely. But sometimes you can say, excuse me, I think that's my phone with a call I've been waiting for. Or, we're so busy today, you really must excuse me. Or have a colleague ready to help bail you out if they see you in trouble. That's always a good one. 3 or 4 more slides to go now only. People quite often say, again, well, we've just taken too many leads. And one thing I'll see, if you cast your eyes down to the last bullet there, the 6th bullet, having too many leads is not a better class of problem. But I'll come to that in a moment. The easiest way to overcome the issue of having too many leads, of course, is to prune them right at the start on the stand. But assuming you've already taken them, be ruthless in focusing on the ones that look like they might bear the first fruit. And that depends on whatever your objectives are. If you really have got too many, use a holding email. Tell them that you're sorry you haven't been able to follow up your visit to their stand, their visit to your stand yet, but we've been overwhelmed with interest in our products. We aim to get back to you by whatever date it happens to be. But then when you say that, make sure that you do. Be quite blunt and ask them if they're buying now. It's very direct, but that sorts the wheat from the chaff very quickly. Of course, if you're looking for specifiers, that's not the right question, because they'll normally say no, because specifiers don't buy much anyway. Have your temporary staff ready to assist, and that clearly speaks for itself. For me, a lot of it is about working harder at the pre-qualifying. It's always worth the effort to make sure that the leads that you take are the people that you really want to talk to after the show. Quality leads are rarely a numbers game. Now to the bottom, why isn't it a better class of problem to have too many leads? Well, for my mind, you can damage your reputation for good service. You can encourage negative feedback on your website. You can waste time following up the wrong leads and then not do any of them very well, particularly, none of which are positive. Sometimes people say, well, we haven't converted all the leads. Well, the question there really is, were they real leads to start with? So were they properly pre-qualified, and have you chased them up sufficiently? What's your inquiry to order cycle? So what is the normal cycle for orders in your business? Is it an impulse purchase, or is it days, weeks, months? Don't expect it to be any faster from a show. For example, in my business, a normal expectation of a customer from a quote to a delivery can be 10 to 12 weeks and is often 6 months. Should we give up at the first no? And the answer is no. It probably needs 3 or 4 times of coaxing and understanding the customer to get to grips with what he wants. He may also have given inquiry to several different companies, and he's overwhelmed with the response that he's got, so he may have a problem too. So no, don't give up. Was this the right show for us? Well, it's probably a bit late to be asking that one now, but of course you should continually evaluate your overall marketing spend. Look critically at the cost, the leads, gauge the outcome, and then reevaluate the ROI. Once again, be critical of the result. If you spent £1,000 or £10,000, what could you have done with the money if you didn't spend it on the show? So, folks, that's the end of what I have to say. I hope it will have helped you to be analytical about the whole process and given you some insight, if you didn't already have it, into how to create your own checklist and leave the show knowing what looks and feels good for you. And that really is what it's all about. So thank you very, very much for tuning in, and I'm certainly ready to take some feedback if anybody would like to give some now. If not, as Carmen has said already at the beginning of the seminar, the slides will be sent out to you and they will be in touch. So if there are any questions, I'm quite ready to take them now. No? Okay. Well, I will sign out and say thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to be having the opportunity to talk to you again. Goodbye.